Okay, so this is where we have some of our oldest sherries. Here we have things that are maybe 60, 80, up to 120 years old. And here's where we have our vintage sherries. Okay, so as you know in Jerez with the Solera system, you can't have a vintage because you're blending from one year to the next. Traditionally, Jerez was a vintage, we made vintage sherries, well, wines. It wasn't until the 19th century that the Solera system came into play to try and stabilise the wines and make sure what you were sending every year was the same quality and the same character. At that time, the majority of wineries gave up vintage system and just continued with Solera. González Byass is one of the few wineries that has both systems. Okay, obviously, we're majority Solera, but we also have a vintage system as well. So every year we set aside 200 casks of our best must. So that first yema, that must which would usually be used for Tío Pepe, we take aside 200 casks. We fortify to 18%, put in, and we let age as a vintage. Okay, we usually leave up to 28, 30 years, and when we go back to check the cask, if we think it's good enough, we release to the market. Okay, sometimes we go back and they just have a really good nose, but the mouth is maybe just too much wood, it's not palatable. So we just keep in our private collection. But some years we go back and we find these amazing gems have developed over years, and we do actually release to the market. It's a very small amount. For example, last year we released 1987. It was 980 bottles. And we won't release in the next vintage until that's completely finished. Okay, so it's maybe only every 4 or 5 years, depending on sales. And it's a special selection that's done by Antonio Flores, our winemaker, and Mauricio González, our chairman. Okay, so it's very limited production. It's not every year, but it's very interesting. You'll taste one later. It's very interesting to taste and compare to the Solera system wines because you can really see the difference. Okay, so this is Bodega de los Reyes, the cellar of the kings, and is dedicated to the Spanish royal family. Okay, so here at the end we have signatures of 5 generations of the Spanish royal family. So we have from Isabel II, this is where we built La Concha for, right up into the current king and queen. So we have Sofia, Juan Carlos, and we also have Felipe and Leticia. Okay, you'll see we have a lot of signatures, as opposed to having a visitor's book, where we're having so many important people coming that we get them to sign a cask. And unfortunately, they don't get to keep the wine, but they get to sign the cask. So we have lots of flamenco and lots of bullfighters. Rex Harrison, Bobby Charlton, Laura Turner. We'll come back this way, but we'll just quickly go in. So this is the original sample room of the founder. This is the founder, Manuel Maria González. Obviously, when he worked in the cellar, there was no bottling of the wines. The wines were still sent by cask. It wasn't until the late 1970s, 1980s that we actually started to bottle here in Jerez. Okay, so everything was sent by cask. He was making so many different types of sherry. A lot of sherries have came about meeting the market demand. You know, the UK wants something sweeter, we'll make a cream. Germany wants something less sweet, we'll make a medium. Playing about with different blends and different agings. So the winemaker wanted to keep a catalogue of every different type of wine that he was making. So every shipment that left the company, he personally would go, take one bottle, bottle it directly from the shipment and keep it in his own private sample room. Okay? Now he died in 1887, and they say this is pretty much how he left it when he died. All we done, we cleaned the walls a couple of years ago because they were black through the age of share, but otherwise this is how he left it when he died. Okay, so because this is a royal cellar, we also have signatures of other royal families. So we have the UK, we have Belgium, Denmark, Japan. Bulgaria. And here we have our most famous signatures. So we have Winston Churchill. This was for his 80th birthday, and it was his nephew who signed for us. Orson Welles spent a lot of time in Jerez. Steven Spielberg, Jacques Cousteau. And here we have Nobel Prize winners. We have Jose Saramago, Severo Ochoa, Milton Friedman. Apparently this was a calculation to see how many vintages you can get in one glass of Tío Pepe. Right, the answer was 50 something. So this was his economic calculation. And then behind we have people like Margaret Thatcher, Julian Jess, Chelsea Clinton, all sorts. Okay, so this is the famous Tío Pepe. Tío Pepe in Spanish basically just means Uncle Joe. Tío is how they say uncle, and Pepe short for Jose. This was Uncle Joe to his friends. As I said before, the founder was really young. He was only 23, so he relied a lot on his uncle to get the company up and running, okay, especially on the wine-making side of things. Now, his uncle's favourite wine was Fino. At that time, Fino was really only drank in Jerez. It wasn't understood outside Jerez, and the majority of wines that were being exported were sweeter, olorosos, etc. But his uncle was really convinced that Fino was the way to go. He said that you have to promote this type of wine, it's so unique and it's so special, and this is what you should be exporting. Okay, so his uncle really helped him a lot get this type of wine recognised and understood, and that's when they started to export, firstly by sending to the UK. Okay. Now, to say thank you to his uncle for all his efforts, he named his only Fino in honour of his uncle, who had helped him so much. Okay, so this is where the name Tío Pepe for our Fino came from. Now, his uncle didn't work in the company, he didn't get paid if you like. All he asked for in return is somewhere he could go with his friends and drink his favourite wine, which was Fino. So the founder built him this cellar. So this is the original cellar of Tío Pepe. He placed all these casks of Fino, now called Tío Pepe. You can see he signed the cask, Solera de Tío Pepe, no one else touched, this is just for Uncle Joe. And his uncle used to come here with his friends and have his parties, and they would just drink directly from the cask. Okay. Now, even today, we still age some of our Tío Pepe in this. We call it Tío Pepe Rebollo. And this is where the majority of the selection for Tío Pepe and Rama comes from. Okay, so you're going to taste later Tío Pepe and Rama, I'm sure you already know. So Tío Pepe and Rama started 7 years ago, and it was originally just the normal Tío Pepe blend, but we would set aside 60 casks, and we wouldn't filter or clarify, just bottle directly from the cask. Nowadays, what we do is an actual special selection. Okay, so Antonio picks the two foundational soleras, which is Tío Pepe Rebollo and Tío Pepe Constancia, which we'll see in a minute, and he selects the best casks from these soleras, and only those casks will be used for Tío Pepe and Rama. Okay, so this time of year, October, he selects the best 100 casks, so the ones that have best survived the summer. Summer's the most difficult time for Fino because it's so hot here, so the ones that have best survived the summer, he picks 100. He spends the whole winter watching these casks, so constantly taking samples, etc., to see how they develop. And then in springtime, which is when the yeast is most healthy, so the end of March, he narrows that 100 casks down to the best 60. And only those 60 casks will be used for the bottling of Tío Pepe and Rama. Okay, so if you've tasted different years, you'll see that each year it changes because it's going to be different casks, and also it's very depending on what the temperature has been like throughout the previous 12 months. Okay, so every year a lot of those casks come from here. Two reasons. Antonio says this is the best place to age your sherry because of the temperature, and it has really high humidity, so the yeast is really, really active here. But also he has a personal reason because Antonio, who you've seen on the wine tasting, was actually born up here. Okay? His parents, traditionally workers in the cellar, used to live here. They had a school, they had a church, they had everything. It was like a little village. Antonio's father was a technical director, and by sheer coincidence, or fate as he says, their bedroom was here. Okay, so you go through this door, takes you to flats, and their bedroom was here. So his mum literally gave birth above the Tío Pepe Solera. Okay, so Antonio says he doesn't have blood, he has Tío Pepe. And this is where we have our other solera, our foundational solera of Tío Pepe. This is called Constancia. So this is where Antonio makes a selection for Tío Pepe and Rama as well. So you can see, for example, when Antonio's marking the casks that he wants to go into the Tío Pepe and Rama selection, he has 3 different classifications. 1 cross, which is really, really good. 2 crosses, which is really good. And in the last 2 years, he's had to invent a 3rd classification of 3 crosses, which are casks which just completely stand out from the rest. So you can see here, for example, this cask would have been marked for Tío Pepe and Rama, this one as well. So only those casks that have these crosses will go into the Tío Pepe and Rama blend. You can smell the Tío Pepe. So you can see that we don't have to cork the cask because it's completely protected by the yeast. And you'll have noticed in the other cellars sometimes we actually have to take the top off because we have to let that space fill up with fresh oxygen. And here we have our famous mice. I'm sure you've heard about our mice. All cellars have mice, usually have dogs and cats to kill the mice, but we actually like to look after our mice here. And so you can see we have a little glass. So the story goes that somebody who worked in the cellar used to feed the mice on his lunch break. One day he came back and there was some wine spilt on the floor. The mice were drinking the wine. So I don't know, he liked mice and they decided to set up their little glass so that they can have their daily drink of sweet sherry. They're really tiny, so they have a little ladder to get up as well. So this actually does happen, you can see we have pictures. And I have personally seen it. You can see here we have some pictures when we've caught them in action. I think they're very happy, drunk mice. This is Calle Ciegos. This has been named as one of the most beautiful streets in Europe, apparently. So at the end we have the Cathedral of Jerez, and then you see you have these vines which must be about 150 years old and completely covers. Okay, so that's us pretty much seen the cellar, so now we're going to go to the tasting. Unfortunately, Antonio's on his way to China today, so you'll be tasting with another winemaker called Jose Alberto Gases.